So moved.
Second.
Ingrid moves, Susan seconds. Is there any discussion, any questions? No? All right, we'll call the vote. John?
Approve.
Jim? Ingrid?
Approve.
Susan?
Approve.
I approve as well. That was easy. Public comment? Don't know if I didn't read any.
Nothing to date that I'm aware of, John.
Okay, sounds good. That brings us to Rhonda's principal report.
That was quick.
Yeah, take it away.
I just first want to thank the community and everyone. We're able to be back in person on Tuesday with the students because of the great job that the community has done with the mitigation strategies, the masking and distancing and all of those. And I want to thank Harbor House for supporting many of Pematic's kids. It would have been very difficult for some of those families to have their children in remote learning if it hadn't been for Harbor House, so thank you. The Sentinel testing continues. We haven't had any positive cases yet, so that's, or, you know, maybe hopefully, fingers crossed, we never will. We're continuing with the vaccine signups for staff. I would just like to say that I really have seen the staff and the students really rising to the challenges that COVID has given us. And I've met with all the regular ed teachers and the specials teachers over the last couple days. And there's just so many positive stories about how students have transitioned. We had the spring, we did remote. In September, we did remote. In the last 2 weeks, we've done remote, and the students are very adaptable and they're doing a great job, even though we are in remote, but everybody is also looking forward to being back in person. The remote is great. It's much better than not doing school, but there's no substitute for being in person. So we have completed our semester 2 enrollment. So we have a little bit of movement. We have 120 who are going to be in person instead of 114. We had some kids move from virtual to in person. We had some kids move from homeschool to in person. We had a couple move from homeschool to virtual. So there was shifting in all the columns. But we're able to have everybody who wants to be in the building, primarily because as part of our CRF grants, we ordered 88 student desks and chairs, and those came in over the winter break, and the custodians did a great job. They had to assemble everything. They had to move all of that stuff from the cafeteria into classrooms upstairs, and the desks that were in those classrooms upstairs or the tables that were in those classrooms, they had to move all that stuff out. And we did some shifting around. The first and second graders and third graders have new desks from the middle school classrooms, new to them. And some of those desks got moved to the cafeteria so that the kindergartners, first graders, and second graders can eat lunch in the cafeteria, one grade at a time. So that's how we were able to get everybody into the building. The little kids can be closer than 6 feet. Their limitation is when they're in the classroom is 3 feet. So we squished up the desks just a little bit. The problem is if they eat in their classroom, they have to be 6 feet when they take their mask off. So when they were eating in their classroom, we just couldn't have them closer than 6 feet. And by being able to squish that space up a little bit and having them eat in the caf, means that we can have a couple more kids in the classrooms. So that's how we were able to make that all work. So thank you to those CRF grants, because that's how that was all able to take place. We had our first early release Thursday last week, and we have another one tomorrow. The next 2 weeks, because they're not full weeks, they're not early release, but tomorrow is. Teachers are taking part in content and grade level common studies, just 2 one-hour sessions between now and the end of the year. Most of that afternoon time is for them to work collaboratively, either within the building, or if they want to reach out to their grade level or content partners across the AOS, they can do that remotely. They're looking at data, they're planning RTI or interventions for students who are having some challenges, and they're able to develop lessons together, work on interdisciplinary units and things like that. So that time is well spent and very much appreciated. Thank you to Jeannie and Riley in the kitchen, because these 2 remote weeks, they have provided food for families, 23 of our Pematic families, which includes 39 students. Thank you to Mr. B, because he did a great job managing those CRF grants when it came to the technology. He checked with teachers, he met with teachers to find out what needs they had, and listened and implemented. He ordered, implemented, trained them how to use the equipment, and every teacher has commented about how nice it was to be able to, especially during remote, they could be presenting and see their kids at the same time, because when you're on the computer and you present something, then you can't see all the people on the Google Meets anymore. So all the equipment that he got made it possible. And it also, he got, they're called Jamboards. They're these, they're quite large, and it makes it so that the teachers can actually see, like when the kids are doing math, the teacher can see all their screens at once, so they can act. It just makes for a more fluid exchange between the 2 platforms. And mostly, well, maybe not mostly, but especially thank you to the custodians. They really worked hard over the break. We've got a beautiful school. They spiffed it up even more, and they've done some painting, washing of floors, the desks and chairs. They are phenomenal, and they are willing to pitch in and do anything that is asked of them. So thank you to them. That's my report.
All right. John, do you have a question?
No, just thanks, Rhonda. And once we're all past this, I'd love to come in and see what the classrooms look like now. I'm sure it's going to look different to me.
Yeah,
We all
that'll be,
want that, John.
yeah, that CRF money is really nice. I'm sure at every school, everybody was quite appreciative to be able to get some new stuff in there, new tech and new furniture and new everything. So there is a silver lining, I suppose. That's part of it. So
That's right.
yeah. Does anybody else have any other questions for Rhonda? Comments? No. All right. Thank you, Rhonda. But I guess we're going to hear from you again on the update about the foyer and then building projects.
Yep. So Greg did a little bit more investigating. Over the break, he drilled down, well, he took up a couple of floor tiles. So he took one down in between those first 2 sets of doors, and found that appears to be solid concrete there. And then he drilled another hole between the second 2 sets of doors, so more like actually in the entryway. And he went down about 4 inches, and then there was about a foot of just empty space, and he hit dirt. at the bottom.
So
So
we
it's
can't fit any kids in there yet.
not yet.
Okay.
There is a time capsule though, John.
Mhm.
I hope so.
I'm kidding. Conspiracy theory.
I'm not sure where we want to move from here. I think part of it, we're going to need to look at the budget and make some decisions about that, and then we can see see what we're going to do with the foyer.
Yep, Susan.
Is it worth getting now a contractor to come give an estimate for, it sounds like if it's hollow in the middle with concrete around, it's got, just a like a frost wall. I mean, I don't even understand why, but I'm sure
Right.
it's possible to demo it, whatever it is.
Right.
Difficult
He was
maybe, but
drilling in from the side. He seemed to think that he was hitting a footing,
yeah.
something that the wall is sitting on. So
That's what it seemed like from the last report too that you gave, that there's no pipes under there. There's no sewer. It doesn't seem like there's anything that's going to give us any headaches. Of course, I say that now and I just jinxed it, but but yeah, I guess that would be the next step for that project. But then I suppose we should kind of look at all the different projects and prioritize what we want to do first.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we want to look at this. Did we think that the Sealander report is still good, or is it so outdated at this point? Mark?
John, I think we're going to have, if I may, an opportunity here. If we're successful in having the operations position come forward, this is a real key example of how we could move forward with that and utilize some of our own assets. So I think that's the short piece. The Sealander report is still valid, but I would say that, that was undertaken prior to me coming, and I've been here 5 years. So we need to, at a minimum, update, and that could also be the work of the operations position. Working with contractors and others, I think it's important that each school, Pematic and all the other schools, have this type of plan so that it can guide school boards in terms of navigating, keeping the buildings current and updated. And that's a focus of this, one of the focus areas of this position. But, not to delay anything, I think there are some resources now we can take advantage of and help guide that in terms of a placeholder for the budget. But I didn't want to miss an opportunity to say that's something that can come off of Rhonda's plate. And I think in the long run, although it's going to cost money, I do believe we'll see efficiencies and savings in the long run through projects like these. Thank you.
Rhonda?
the Sealander report, the two things that are left from that are the foyer and the windows in the wing.
Okay. All right. So we'll have to look forward towards the budget, and then hopefully, assuming the operations position gets approved, that'll help out things too.
I think, John, if I may, I think, the Sealander report and reports of all the schools, that's an example where, some of the qualities that we're looking for is for an individual that can network and navigate that and keep that plan, which has been a good plan, current and moving forward. So,
Yep.
thank you.
Okay. Good. Does anybody have any questions or comments about any of that stuff? Nope. All right. Good to go. That brings us to the budget.
John, if I may, can I just make a couple of opening pieces before turn it over to you? And
Yep. Did everybody get the email from? Everybody got the email from Nancy with the updated budget? Okay. Okay. Go for it, Mark.
And I'm working off that. Nancy just wanted me to pass along that she's in transit. I did speak to her this afternoon. Even in this busy time, I just want to give a shout out to her and Rhonda for putting this budget forward. I think, just to remind folks, some folks that may be listening in or new folks, that the budget is a process. It's not an event. And, as we look at this, I'd like to first say that we certainly have great stewards of the budgets that are approved and the budgets that we're fortunate enough to get the support of from the community. Rhonda does an exceptional job navigating that each and every day. The public needs to know. She's fiscally conservative, but makes sure that the job gets done for kids and teachers. So I'm pleased about that, as is Nancy. So these are unprecedented times, as we all know. And as you look at the carry forward, both Nancy and I would like to just remind everyone that's going to raise some eyebrows when you look at a potential of $590,000 and say, well, holy cow. That's a good problem to have, number one, not necessarily a problem. And number two, for context, the impact of COVID is seen here. This is the impact of COVID, and I'll briefly talk a little bit about that, but also the fact that what the board does with that, and ultimately the town, will be really important in the budgets to come. We've seen that before. We want to avoid cliffs and spikes. And if we do not, and the board has in the past, navigate that judiciously, it does come back to bite communities. So I wanted to put that out there. So the COVID basically had, there's two phenomena. Number one, we're going to see increases, as we get the audit in some areas that we didn't consider in the current budget, and also funds that we did not expend. So on both ends, and there are a lot of unanticipated costs that we're dealing with right now. That stated, our schools haven't been closed, but the buildings haven't always been open. So there's some pieces there that we need to bring information forward in. So I just wanted to put it out there that carry forward is significant, and we will be recommending setting aside a portion of that carry forward, depending upon what the school committee ultimately recommends, to navigate future years. I'm certainly no economist, but those that are forecasting are looking at the years to come, and I think we need to be really conservative with our approach, so that we're making sure, unlike the federal government or other entities, we've got to come in with a balanced budget and we got to live by it. So I just want to make sure that we're conscious of the impact. And I want to turn it back to Rhonda, but just to put into context that if you look at the overall impact of this budget, two things stand out. We certainly don't have a determined placeholder for salaries and benefits yet, for two reasons. We're in collective bargaining right now with our teachers. We hope to receive an update and information in late January, so we can know where we're at in a real finite term. And the second piece is our health insurance. We historically have budgeted 10%. And in this year, recognizing things that are happening around us, again, Nancy and I are trying to be very cautious here, but we recognize that 10 may be a stretch in this year. So we've gone to 8% in both the ALS budget and all the local budgets. So that is reflected here. But that's not to say that when we get the information on health insurance, as we typically do in April, we can make adjustments to this budget as well, depending upon what that looks like. So those are kind of the broad brush pieces. Rhonda will get into requests for additional items. I would just say in that regard and reserves, if you look at the grand total without consideration of additional items, and aside from any reserves that you would add to potentially, this budget, turning the page right here with what we have, would be represent a 0.59% decrease. The The additional items Rhonda will get into in terms of priority, I want to say I support and appreciate Rhonda bringing those forward. It's important for people to know the needs, what they are, because if we don't articulate them, then surprises come. That being said, I'm concerned about the potential impact of the total for the additional items, which would reflect a 8.83% increase and a grand total, if you factor the two, of an 8.24. I would say this, the budget's a discussion item for tonight. It's a process. It's not an event. It's a starting place. And we have a lot of work to do. Everybody knows that. But I think it's important to look at those things, but we're definitely, I believe, have to prioritize both within this budget and for future years. So sorry, John, probably long-winded, but I was trying to do some outreach to the community as well in terms of where we're going. I would just say with the maintenance reserves, that's looking healthy at 149. Our bus reserve, again, we're in good stead there. The special education reserve, some may raise eyebrows, but that right there could go in an instant. It is typically $100,000 or more for one student for an out-of-district placement. So Southwest Harbor's in good stead with their reserve right there. And I'll turn it over to Rhonda. John, thank you.
So if we could look at the budget one cost center at a time. Regular instruction. One of the pieces that the staff and I had talked about last year was the need for more social emotional support for our kids. And so last year we had put in, we were, as an AOS, we had talked about a behavior specialist and we were going to contribute to that. And then we looked at the needs and we hired a second psychologist instead, which is phenomenal. And they're great to work with. And they add a lot to what we can do here, but they're more, I would say they're almost more of a support for the adults because they're testing the kids, they're providing us with ideas of how to work with the kids. They aren't, they're like removed, they're one person removed from the student, right? Because everything, the actual help to the student is going through another adult. So that will take some time for all of that to play out, but we have students, particularly in the younger grades, who could benefit from, who don't receive special services, but could benefit from maybe some therapy or some OT or PT services, speech services. They don't fall under the umbrella of special ed, so they don't fall under our regular budget line for those things. So what I did is I'm gonna skip around just a little bit, but in the special ed cost center, we've typically had 20,000 for contracted services. We typically don't spend more than 10,000 in that line. So I took 5,000, so there's still 15, so there's still plenty of money there. I took 5,000 from there and put it in the regular ed. Nancy and I created a professional services, it says council ELL. But we put 5,000 of the special ed contracted services there and then added another 5. So there's 10,000 in that line for regular ed students to receive RTI contracted services. Anybody have any questions about that? Because that's probably the most convoluted. John?
Yeah.
Can you give me an example of somebody you might contract with to help with the student?
Well, I don't know who specifically they would be.
We don't want a who, Rhonda, just a position or an example of a program.
Well,
So if there's a clinical social worker that maybe you thought there was a kid who might benefit from some time with a clinical social worker who you could identify and contract with, maybe that would be a use for that.
yeah, and
Okay.
maybe if we could provide some of those services to students earlier before they become IEP students, maybe they wouldn't have to have an IEP.
And if I may, John Bench, if I may just chime in, that's also an opportunity sometimes where we don't actually have to hire a position that it might be very specialized. And sometimes we can couple that with other schools too. So it's a very efficient way to deliver the needs of the program. And I think it's a win-win in that respect.
John, do you have another question?
Yeah, sorry, just because I know somebody's going to ask. Where's the guidance teacher fit into this dynamic?
The school counselor is definitely working with kids, but at the K2, even K4 level, K3 level, it's primarily whole group. She meets with some students individually or in small groups, but she's not able to meet the needs of all of those students. The individual or small groups is primarily 4th through 8th. And the younger grades, like I said, it's a whole class that she's working with. Only so much time in a day.
Anybody else have any other questions? All right, moving on.
All right. Also in the regular instruction, you'll see a line for the asymptomatic testing, $9,400. So those are the two larger items in that cost center. That the other larger things are salaries or Blue Cross Blue Shield that we really don't have control over. So. Then in special ed on page 4, or on mine because page 3 only has like one line on it. I don't know about yours, but the tuition, we've traditionally in the past always had 60,000 in that line, and we reduced it last year to 30,000 to so that we could do some other things. And so Nancy and I, we put it back up to 60, which created this $30,000 difference. But actually the 60 is what we've usually done. That is a place that, because we've got over, or will have it in June, over 300,000 in reserve, maybe that's a place where we could cut a little bit.
So at the end, though, it says on the reserve special ed, that 305 number says if transfer of 30K from current budget. Does that mean like the 2020, 21 budget? That's okay. So this does not include 60.
Right.
And you feel, Mark, that having 360 as a special ed reserve is not too much? Or, I mean, nothing would be too much if it can be wiped out.
What I would say is at this point, Susan, given where we're at, I think it's adequate. It's very adequate. It's in comparison to many of our other schools, that would be, we would feel comfortable if all of our schools were in that position. But I think at this point with our budget, it's a reserve. And to add to that right now, given some of these other considerations, I think right now we're in a place where we can maintain what we have and look at other areas.
Maintain
Yes.
what we have as in the 305, or I guess what would be an ideal number so that if we are bumping this up to 60, they see that doubling, which we can explain from what we did last year. You know, how, if we're not drawing on it, what's our maximum goal?
I think I would say right now, and Rhonda, please chime in. I mean, Melissa may have some thoughts on this and Nancy, but I would recommend that right now you're at a place where you could hold off on any additional contributions at this time. For me, you know, trying to be conservative, I would like to have all the schools at least 225,000. You've exceeded that, and that's not a bad thing. That means that reserve is in place. Let's consider this again. These are for unanticipated costs that may happen when a family and a student with needs comes to you and we cannot service that child. And for one student, for 1 year, that could be in excess of $100,000. That may never happen, but within the AOS right now, we have communities that are significantly impacted by this. And it's very precarious. It creates some things that none of us would want to see. They don't have the ability because their reserve is virtually tapped out to navigate any future impact that might come in. And so to your point, Susan, you know, there's never not enough for something like that. It's kind of like a rainy day fund.
Right.
You know, and we don't want to build those up to levels that would be not effective. But I think you're in a place where if you were at 225 to 250, given today's programming and monies, I would feel comfortable with that. I also feel equally comfortable to say, let's take a year and devote our attention to other areas.
I guess that's my point. I feel like this line item is one that's very easy to explain to taxpayers. You know, we don't have a choice here. We need to draw these funds if in the event, you know, but I think that we ought to have, you know, if 300 is an acceptable limit, then let's not contribute this year. And again, like I said, if it comes up next year as a bump, then, you know, and that way it can just be seen as replacing what we've drawn. And if we can't put in 100 grand, if we draw it, but we can work towards it. So that would be
the other piece, Susan, is, you know, the board can keep a close eye on this. If we have a child with needs and it falls below 200, that's something to pay attention to, number one. And number two, let's not forget the Southwest Harbor and all the AOS member schools contribute to an additional reserve at the AOS level that can kick in if you need it. Yeah. But the local reserve has to be exhausted first, and it has to be paid back with a minor assessment. So those pieces are there. So I think you've got plenty of safety nets, and you can be proud of the work you guys have done because you're in good stead. I would agree. You don't need to add to that this particular year.
Sweet, 60 grand.
Just to be clear, it does. I mean, we won't be at 300,000 unless we put in the extra 30 grand this year. No,
we're at 30,000 with this year's budget is what I'm understanding, right?
We are projected, again, this is according to audit, as of June 30th of this year, within this fiscal year, we would be at $305,392 if you transfer the transfer of $30,000 from the current budget, the current approved budget is made. That's what your reserve will be, which I support, Nancy supports, and to Susan's point, but what you do next year, I think, is where you have significant latitude.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right. Any other questions about that stuff? Especially
Rhonda, I just want to check in with you. Do you agree with all those comments?
Yeah, I yellowed it on my paper so that, because I don't think that we need to contribute that.
I just want to make sure we're on the same page. And I just got something from Nancy too. So we're on the same page, John.
Also, the other professional services therapy, that's showing a negative of 5,000. That's the 5,000 that moved to the regular ed. And that's, again, those are the items in that part of the budget that we kind of have some control over. Not too much. On page 5, the co-curricular, not a lot has changed on that. There is that co-curricular wellness incentive. That's money to provide PD around wellness or incentives for, like this past weekend when Ellen challenged everyone to get out and about in the park or just outside somewhere. Everybody who sent a picture to her of themselves out exercising, she had a drawing, and somebody won a Fitbit from that. So, and it's usually something related to fitness, the prize. So it might be a gift card to go to the Harbor House Fitness Center, Fitbits, different things like that.
Can I ask a question? Why our anticipated athletic stipends are higher than budgeted in a year when I feel like our athletics have been cut?
The actual expenditure 1920 was reduced because there weren't any spring activities or sports.
No, I mean budget to anticipated, current budget to anticipated.
In the very first line? Or-
No, the second, the
Oh,
current budget as compared to anticipated expenditures.
Well, those are also highlighted in orange. What does that mean?
I don't know, that's a Nancy. Nancy did that, so I'm not exactly sure. I don't know the answer.
But, and I thought that in the 1920, which would have been last spring, that we paid out all of the coaching stipends to everybody, but that we weren't going to be doing that in 2020, 2021 if programs weren't taking place. So we probably need some clarity on that line.
Yeah, I can ask her.
If there's something that rings the bell of this community, it's anything sports related, so.
So any of those ones that are in orange or,
Yeah, it would just be interesting to get some clarity on that.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't mean that the proposed budget for next year shouldn't be back at a level of where it was, but it would be nice to get some clarity on what the anticipated expenditures are going to be.
And if they're higher than the budget, why?
Right.
So, okay.
is there anything else about the co-curricular?
No.
The summer school and learning labs were maintained in the current budget, 7,000, and the proposed is 7. The anticipated expenditures for this year are down a little bit because we're not doing morning learning lab. And summer school looked different this past summer. It was remote.
Um,
Yeah, probably going to look.
Why are we not doing morning learning lab? Because we don't have anybody who'll do it, or because of pods?
Because
And,
of pods, it's hard to do it without crossing pods consistent.
So knowing that our kids are not going to be where we would love them to be, should we be taking that into account for our budget for next year to have more services available to kids to help them try to catch up with where they, where they probably would have been prior to COVID?
So
I think I would anticipate that we would have morning learning lab again. And then we're also looking at having some adults work with kids on Thursday afternoons. And then Julie also has one or two people from College of the Atlantic. Maybe you can speak to that because I may have the specifics incorrect, but who would be doing some tutoring.
we have other people in the community who've also asked about doing some tutoring with kids. And we're also going to be looking at an expanded model for summer school, which will have the blend of remote and in person to enable more people to be involved, but not have to commit to the 3 hours every single day. I think budgeting with awareness that there's going to be some of those needs, and we're hoping that some of the new funds that are coming down would be able to be used for this as well. But I think it's good to note that there will be ongoing supports needed.
Julie, do you think that there's 7,000 in that line now? Should we be increasing that?
I don't know that you have to increase it if, I think it's going to depend on how many additional grant funds we have and also how much we're able to do with the tutoring program with COA. That's going to be a new opportunity for us that they may want to continue, and they pay for the tutoring. So these are work study students, and they would be doing their assignment with us instead of at the college.
John? Yeah, if I would just add, maybe, this is the first time a discussion item, so I think we make a note of that. We can do some more research and fine tuning. It's an area that, along with many others, we should just flag to revisit. We may want to increase it. It may be good, but we can just note that and make adjustments as we gather more info.
Yeah, I agree. In a month, we may know a little bit more. We can look at it again.
Okay. Sounds good.
Guidance, there are no real changes. On page 6, again, to health services, we have a new nurse, but the supplies are down a little bit. We have, through the CRF grants, bought a ton of gowns and masks and gloves, and plus we got a lot from the state too. So the supplies are down a little bit in that budget. Improvement of instruction. Again, we increased the instructional grants a little bit because we had more people than we anticipated who wanted to take part in summer work, which is a great problem to have. It's nice that so many of our educators want to contribute and be a part of that. Then the library and audio visual, there's not a lot of changes there. A little bit of an increase in books and supplies, but not astronomical. On page 7, technology. Not a lot of changes there. That we have control over the siteware license. It is the biggest $5,778 difference. It has, I believe that's because of that firewall. I'm not really.
So you're talking about the assessment from the district line? There's two things. One is we've had to make an investment in software district-wide because of being remote, and several of the tools are things that people want to keep using, even if they're going to be in person. So we kind of created they weren't things that necessarily we would have offered before, but now they're kind of part of what we're doing. And then, as Rhonda mentioned, there's significant technology infrastructure work that's been going on. And so each of the budgets have had to absorb some of the firewall and expansion of the Wi-Fi costs.
Anybody have any technology questions? Office of the Superintendent, that's our portion is 10.25%. So that it's a formula.
John, if I may too, we've been really pleased that in previous budgets, that number has been really, we think, very conservative. This number reflects the additional items in the AOS budget. It's that operations position, which would include support for maintenance, transportation. It also includes a stipend placeholder for us for food service coordination. And it also reflects additional days in the summer for our data coordinator and supported teaching and learning. So that represents the increase. Typically, we would see something either half or below that in years and what we've experienced in previous budgets.
You
Thanks,
mean
Mark.
the increase would be half of what we're seeing?
Excuse me. Thank you for the clarification.
Not the total amount for anyone who's, I knew what you meant. I think the rest of
I'm sorry. Yeah, it's been a long Zoom day, and thank
Yeah.
you. That was, yes, boy. People, please stop typing. Ingrid corrected. Yes. Thank you.
For the school committee portion, there's a $2,000 increase in the legal and audit fee. In 1920, we spent just over 11,000, and we're anticipating spending 11,000 this year, but we have 9,000 budgeted. So we upped next year's budget to reflect that 11,000. So up 2,000.
no big raises for us.
I wish. That guys are definitely worth it, but
Public
It's in the-
service. Public
It's in the
service.
additional items. It's in the additional items later.
Public service.
Oh, what, are we getting health insurance?
Health insurance for everyone.
Exactly.
under Office of the Principal, there aren't any big changes. Do you guys have any questions on those? There's still some advertising money in there. We have to advertise the CJ Grant kindergarten screening. So there are some things that we have to advertise, even though we've talked about for hiring, we would use more like the online services that are available.
John, forgive me, but I just want to, if I may too, just looking at Office of the Principal, I don't want anybody looking at that to think we don't believe our principal or anybody else is not doing a good job. It says 0%. We have a line in our budgets, just to remind folks of negotiated agreements. It's all encompassing. It's a placeholder. And so once those determinants are made, we migrate those numbers out. And
That was like 60 or something.
yes.
The second line in the
Yeah, 63. Yeah.
So, and that, again, that's a placeholder depending upon where we end up, and we'll go from there. But I just wanted to remind everybody of that. It looks a little different because it's a negotiating year.
And student transportation, I'm scrambling to find my notes from Nancy about the busing, but so in order for I've never bought a bus, so I'm not exactly quite.
No.
To get help,
Well,
I
let me
think,
tell you, no.
from the state, you have to have, as of June 30th, a certain mileage on the bus, and it has to be a certain age. And ours was old enough, but it was 600 and something miles short of the mileage cutoff. So
For
What do you
what?
mean by mileage cutoff? So the state says that that once your bus reaches a certain mileage, you can't use it anymore?
no, in order to get some help on the bus purchase,
Oh,
Have you
gotcha.
gotten help previously on bus purchase?
I offered to take it to Aroostook County, but Rhonda said no.
Does this have something to do with CARES Act money? I mean, we haven't received support in the past for bus purchases, have we?
I don't know, she got online and to do the request, and they said,
We had the same situation, John, and others on Swans Island. And it's one of those things where I'll do some more research, but my understanding is they have a cap because they want to make sure that there's a set amount of mileage and a set life expectancy for a bus. And that's the issue. So, as Rhonda said, it's like, seriously, 500 or 600 miles short, but yeah, there's that cutoff. And that we experienced the same piece on Swans.
I think that we could still choose to just
Yeah.
purchase it, though.
You can. I mean, it's just about the reimbursement or the assistance, which is what happened in the case of Swans Island.
Don't ask me why, but I've read the statutes about school buses, and there's a lot of language in there about all your vehicles have to be within 6 years old or something. You can't go beyond that. And the theory behind that, it was, well, every couple of years, there's new safety things coming out, and you always want to have the latest safety thing. Now, school buses don't actually change, but it impacts more your smaller vehicles. But that's the theory, and I kind of think the state should revisit some of that. But
Mhm.
So does this budget represents purchasing a new bus in 21, 22?
Mhm.
Okay.
And can you buy a bus for 100 grand? The last one was like 90, right?
I think the answer is yes, Susan, and we'd be comfortable with that number, Nancy and I. And if
Yeah, we, the reserve,
You'd
the
be
end
at
of the
102.
school year is 82,000, almost 83,000. So.
Right, but if we bought it in the summer, we'd have 100 and after July 1st, obviously, we'd have 102, right?
Yeah.
So for the next meeting, can you just give us some clarity on what we get back from the state? Like, I've never heard this in 13 years, so I'm curious about that.
Yeah.
So just based on a little bit of research right now, we need to get more information. It looks like it's an application process in November. It looks like it's been made more widely available than maybe in the past, Ingrid, which is why we're now possibly eligible. And it's pretty spelled out in this new program. So it's the school bus purchase program.
Oh, great.
Take any aid we can get from the state. That's great.
I don't know though, because I think we won't because
We didn't meet the mileage
we
requirement.
didn't meet the mileage requirement, but unless you decided that you wanted to run the bus for another year and apply next year, you could make a decision, obviously.
Let me rent the school bus all summer. I'll probably get you that mileage.
Right.
It probably has it right now. That's the,
Yeah, it had to be in November that it had it. It's very
Well,
specific.
yeah, well, and it was of June. Let's see. Yeah, as of June 30th. So even by the time Nancy filled that out in November, we'd hit the correct mileage. But because we had to report out where it was June 30th, we didn't.
Gotcha.
The other thing is, there's $11,000 put into the budget. We've talked for a couple of years about putting cameras on the buses, the stop arm cameras, because of people don't stop for the bus. And so 11,000 is the price to do all 3 buses. If we purchase a bus, we would do that as part of the purchase on that one bus. So that $11,000 would be 2/3 of that, because we'd only need money to do the other 2 buses. So once we know for sure whether or not we're going to purchase a bus, then that replace purchase of equipment line might change.
Violet's gonna sing a little song as she's running down the hallway.
Nice. Serenade us. Anything else about transportation? Operations and maintenance of plant. The supply line is up 10,000 because that's where we put the money in for the PPE. We put $10,000 in for PPE in case we're still living the COVID life next school year. And in case we don't have, CRF money, but we still need those supplies. The heating oil, Nancy put a placeholder of $2.75 a gallon in, but that she hasn't locked in at a price yet. So that will change between now and further on in the spring.
Do we need to put any money aside for that signage stuff we were talking about with the tree folks?
Yeah, that's in the contracted services grounds, that $1,500 difference is for that.
Okay.
And then there's also some money in the land and improvements line. Usually we've had $2,500 for playground maintenance, and we doubled that. So we could use a little bit of that too for out front. Like if we have to purchase a tree, the conservation committee is trying to raise money now to replace the trees, and do some groundwork out there, but we'll have to help out some with that. We'll see how much we have to help out once they finish their campaign to raise money for it.
I noticed that we're seeing an anticipated higher than anticipated expense for power, electricity. Why would we expect that to go back down next year?
That would.
The short answer, you know what, John, we got to come back and take a look at that.
The windows are open, and we don't think the windows will be open next
Well,
year.
no,
The windows will be closed.
it might, I'd have to talk to Nancy, but I think it might have reflected the fact that we were out, but that might not be it. in it all. That's, this is forecasting FY22, so we could come back. I didn't catch that.
I
And
didn't
I'll
catch
talk.
it either.
I mean,
I'll put it on my list of things to clarify with Nancy.
and, while we're on that subject, that, throw it out there that, anything we can do for sustainability, green initiatives, if there's an opportunity to take a look at solar, well, there always is an opportunity, but we've seen positive results both within the high school and Tremont. So that might be something to consider too, midterm. And it also aligns really very, very, very well with the Climate to Thrive and the initiative here on MDI. So I think that's something we ought to pay attention to, regardless of whether the number is adequate or not. That's a focus area.
John, if I could just add to that, I think PEMTIC could also look at purchasing power and having the benefit of having your budget not be going up and down for a huge part of it, because you would know what that cost was every single year. So if you were to purchase from one of the solar farms or from one of the aggregate places, you'd be able to know exactly what you're going to be putting out. And that might be a benefit, particularly as the building ages.
Mm-hmm.
That'll certainly be something that the operations director can help us move forward with too. I'm not sure what the timeline is on the Long Pond solar farm. Does anybody know when it's, I mean, they've cleared a lot of trees, but I'm not sure when it's supposed to be up. Yeah.
I can get that information. I'm going to be at the energy subcommittee tomorrow and I'll get an update. So I'd be happy to bring that back to PEMTIC.
Thank you.
Is there anything on else on page 9? Last page. We debt service, we pay off this year, so yay. The food service has a $51,000 balance in it. So instead of, I think since I've been here, or at least the last 3 budgets, we've been putting aside 80,000. And so we dropped that down to 70,000 because the balance is healthy. So then additional items. These are not in any kind of order right now. Greg and I were talking this morning, and there was, the committee, we had talked, I think last month, about the school entrance, and that we thought 150,000 for that, for the project would be appropriate. So it did, this, as of this morning, it said school entrance 150,000. But when Greg and I were talking this morning, and instead of 8.24 there at the end, it was 11 something. We talked, and we realized too that there was nothing in there about hiring an engineer or a contractor to come and plan out what does that project entail, and so that we can put it out to bid and have different companies, when those bids come in, comparing this apples to apples. So because that discussion happened this morning, I don't really know how much it would cost to have somebody come do that, but we said, oh, well, 50,000 should cover it. And we thought that, we could, between now and next month, we could research and find out what the actual cost would be, and then change that and put the right amount in there. But we wanted something, we didn't want the project to get lost.
So that means that, while we don't know concretely, the thought would be that that front entrance would cost $200,000. Okay, I mean, yeah, I know contractor, but that's a lot of money for, yeah.
I would think 10 could cover your planning
For the planning.
comfortably. Yeah.
Right. So, we could change it now and make it 10, but I had no idea, I've
Yeah.
not experienced that. That's gonna be one of the benefits of having that district person, right? They'll have a much better idea of costs for that kind of stuff. So we could drop that down to 10 if you guys are comfortable with that.
As long as this doesn't come back and
100,000.
bite me when it,
I'd lean towards 15, but
Okay.
I mean, I think it makes sense to just put the planning in this year's budget, and then we talk about actual construction in next year's budget.
And
Potentially.
I think it was 3 years ago, Mike Sealander came back and looked at those two projects again, the windows and the front foyer. And the front foyer, he said 3 years ago, would cost at least $120,000. So.
But I also think that he thought that there was probably mechanical stuff and other things running through
Right.
there. And so, I mean, I don't know, maybe that's more accurate, but to me, it seems like a huge amount of money at the 150. So I think it would be helpful before we start like cutting or changing any numbers to get an understanding. Like, I have no idea what self-contained fifth grade means, to walk through.
Want me to go through the list?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then we can talk about amounts.
Yeah.
The windows are the windows that are in the wing on either end in the two stairwells. The pre-K program we talked about last year. Nancy and I did up, last year we put in 75,000 and we upped that to 80,000 to take into account Blue Cross Blue Shield and the salaries of the two people, the teacher and the ed tech. Self-contained fifth, the middle school teachers and I for a couple of years have talked about fifth grade really isn't ready for that middle school model. And what would it look like if fifth grade was self-contained?
Okay.
So that's why it's in here. I talked with fourth grade teacher. She also agrees fifth grade would be better served being self-contained. It also, not knowing if we're still going to be under COVID restrictions next year. I mean, we have an action item about having an ed tech take on a couple of classes. So having an additional teacher, we'd have a little bit more flexibility that way too, in case we need to do extra things because of COVID.
So Jim.
Does additional teacher mean that there would be two teachers for fifth grade next year?
There would be one teacher for fifth grade, and then the 4 regular ed middle school teachers that there are now would teach their content area, and then they would be available to provide RTI services for students. That would be my plan.
So I don't know when this change took place, when we bumped actually I do know when the change took place because it was my son's freshman year in high school, because we lost the split. His was the last split class. So at one point we had 1 6th grade, 1 7th grade, 2 8th grades. And when that group of kids went off to the high school, that's when we added 5th into middle school so that each teacher had you know what I mean? It was
A full load.
a grade, yes. So So I guess you're gonna need to explain to us maybe a little bit more than just RTI, what what they're gonna be doing if we're taking a class out of that mix.
Can I speak to that for a second, Rhonda? It might be helpful.
Mhm.
So I would say a couple of things here, and I would also say that no decisions have been made. So
Mhm.
this is part of the discussion and part of what's in the budget. So this is but another issue that happens when you have schools that are at certain sizes and you try to staff them for K-8. And so what you're looking at is the fact that you've had this overhanging math class for a long time, and you've had a number of scheduling issues around time, and time not being as long in some of the instructional pieces as some of the other schools are able to offer in the middle school. You've got a full middle school model, which means that fifth graders are changing among 4 classes. Some of the other schools, we've moved to a 5-6 model, which each have 2 teachers that each teach 2 subjects, and then 7-8 and have the same thing. Your numbers are quirky at Pematic for that. You still are going to benefit from, and you've been able to offer a really good program, particularly at 7-8, because your 7-8 teachers have been teaching 6th. That's part of why your 6th grade is doing so well. So I think if you're looking at, so there's a programming piece, and then there's a puzzle solving piece because of the size of and the numbers that are involved of kids, and then trying to meet the needs of kids at different levels in the middle school. 5th grade self-contained has real pros and real cons. 5th grade full middle school has real pros and real cons. So I think that there's going to have to be some discussion about what makes the most sense for Pematic from a Pematic specific place, but that also takes into account the educational piece. And I know that Rhonda and her staff have been talking a lot about this.
And that 5th grade class will be this year's 4th grade class, which is our biggest. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, so I think we have to think about a couple of things, and we need to think about it in a way that would be really nice if we didn't have to change it every single year. So MDES right now is in a situation where they have bubbles and they split and they have new staffing, and it's one of the things that's been nice about Pematic has been the longevity and stability of the teaching staff there. And so I think we want to create a situation that doesn't end up with bubbles. Now, I think we made a really good decision at Pematic to separate out 3rd and 4th back into self-contained classes. Was it the first year you were here, Rhonda? No, they weren't. They weren't split when you came. So before you came, they had that model I was just saying was pretty good for 5-6, but they had it in 3-4. They had one teacher doing 2 for 3 and 4. That became really obvious that the self-contained made more sense, particularly for 3rd and 4th too. So I think it's far-seeing to anticipate that there may be a need to do something differently, because right now what you have is what I call dangler classes. So you don't have like dedicated adults to the dedicated group of kids. They're just kind of going all over. They happen to have this person or this person for math, this person or this person for ELA, this person or this person for social studies. It's not a model that is a great match for 5th grade on another level too, because it requires a lot of executive functioning if you're going to all those different teachers. So there's more discussion to be had.
And Ingrid, what I was thinking when I said the RTI is that, right now for this year, let me back up. Last year, we had a about a half an hour of dedicated RTI time, 4 days a week. And with COVID, we went back to putting that time into the classes instead of having a separate RTI time because of the mixing of pods, because for RTI, you meet with kids based on their need, not based on their grade. So we couldn't figure out how to do that without mixing pods. So we, if we could have the 4 content area teachers have time in their day, we could provide intervention services to those kids who it would provide more time for special ed to meet with kids, and it would also provide support for those kids who aren't special ed but who are still struggling, and it would provide time for those teachers to also meet with groups of students who need more, who are exceeding the standard and who want more or are particularly interested in a content area, which is difficult to do in any year.
Yeah, but it's been impossible this year. And in addition, we've been adding an advisory for middle school, which we know is badly needed. And then we were also trying to do the civil discourse training. We just need to be setting up our day differently. It can't be 45 minutes of this and 45 minutes of that.
Right. And the other thing, the other piece to that too is, yeah, we added that time back in to the content area classes, but we still really aren't at the minutes that each one of those classes should be in a day to move the content along.
So, so everything that you've just said makes sense to me. Have you guys, and it's fine if the answer is no, not yet, kind of mapped out how that would look over the course of a day and then a week? Because I can imagine that it would be very challenging to align the English teacher's free time to help additional kids with those kids' schedules. So while in theory it sounds great, I wonder how it all actually plays out in practice. And I think I would want that exercise to be done prior to being like, yeah, okay, this can work, right?
Yeah, the answer is not yet.
Yeah.
I wanted to gauge support. Like if everybody was like, no way, I wouldn't want to have put that time in. If people are interested enough that they want me to go through that exercise, I'm more than happy to go through that exercise.
So for me, I would have to say, I don't know enough to be supportive of this, right? So I think I would need that additional information to determine whether or not I thought it made sense.
Okay.
But I don't know how the rest of the group
Yeah.
feels.
John?
So just for the sake of argument, so I'm understanding this, and I'm just going to use the teachers who are currently there. I don't know how you would configure it, but just say, so you're saying for middle school, you'd have Mrs. Reed for math and Mrs. Norwood for science, Mrs. Clark for English, and Mrs. Bean for social studies.
Mhm.
And then you'd have a new 5th grade teacher is a dedicated 5th grade teacher.
Mhm.
And those middle school teachers, because they're presumably their schedule would have time to do some intervention. What's the role of our already existing math interventionists, and would they just sort of be focusing on the lower grades?
They could also be helping out during that intervention time with the math teacher or with the ELA teacher.
Okay.
Intervention is because you want to help those who are struggling, and you also want to provide enrichment.
Yeah, of course.
it takes a lot of people in order to pull that off well.
Susan?
Okay, so sorry, my internet connection is a little unstable, or it was when you started, and so you were electronically frozen. But I didn't really fully hear and or understand the problem we're trying to solve, and I just wanted to make sure that, you know, it was fifth grade and not this group of fifth graders, because that seems like a slippery slope, you know, because I'm sure every classroom could use more dedicated class time and more RTI time, but it feels overwhelming to think of this. And then I just had this thought, which Pematech in particular seems to have the history of doing, is, you know, we've added teachers to the mix to accommodate for COVID. And are we creating a job for someone to continue, you know, that I hope that's not what we're doing, is all I have to say. And I'm not talking about particular players in this instance, but, you know, it just feels like we just keep adding and adding. And it, from my standpoint, it's getting harder and harder to explain because the reasoning seems a little more convoluted every time. And it all has to do, it seems like, with RTI, and I completely understand the need. But, you know, that's where we get the pushback from the taxpayers when we do. And I just, you know, want to make sure that we're solving a problem that we see as a projected need for the long term and not this COVID year. Yeah, those are my thoughts.
The middle school team has been talking about this at least for 2 years, long before COVID. It's not just about the current fourth graders, it's about maybe a philosophy of what middle school looks like, and the executive functioning skills and the social emotional development of fifth graders.
John,
Go ahead, Mark. Yep.
I would be remiss. I think this is a very healthy conversation. And again, it's a starting point, but I'd be remiss if I didn't point out the opportunity that is here for our kids, for our schools, for our communities, middle level programming. We have at least 2 schools that are going to have to consider major projects. And, you know, I'm thinking about MDI High School over and over and over, and the conversations and how the stars seem like they're in alignment, that we know middle level programming is the right thing to do for kids. The research is there. And yet we also know that all of our schools are necessary, and that the education we provide is amazing for these kids. But I think that for Southwest and all of our member communities, we have an opportunity. Every single one of our member communities asked us to continue to explore this concept. And, you know, again, I think Rhonda, as the principal, has done her due diligence to bring things forward, but I would submit there's a larger question at hand here as to whether or not we're going to continue in our present format of K-8 schools, or do we shift and consider the research and consider the future, knowing full well that we need our schools, and is this an opportunity also to consider the needs of our kids and differentiating RTI, pre-K, and a number of other pieces. You'll see other additional items. I think there are other ways to look at this to navigate these needs more cost effectively and more strategically. And I think that's a conversation that we all have to continue to bear in mind. And you know, it's good that we have the luxury at this starting point to consider it. But again, I think putting them on the table is really important. The numbers right now, they're always important, but where we are in the end is going to be critical. So appreciate you letting me offer that, John. Thanks.
Any other questions about the fifth grade position? I can put together some.
Oh, Jim, do you have another question?
I also, as some of the other members, would like to see what this looks like.
Yeah.
Before.
Yeah, I think Rhonda's planning on getting some more information to us on that one.
The next item is a halftime, for lack of a better term, tech coordinator. It would be someone to manage basically the nuts and bolts. Every student has a device at this point. Every adult has a device. That's almost 200 devices that our tech integrator is trying to take care of, plus all the new document cameras and jam boards and all the new equipment that we've received through CRF. It's a lot to manage. That means that he is primarily working on computers rather than meeting with kids, teaching really important skills around digital citizenship, working with teachers on how to integrate technology into their lessons and classrooms. He's a tech integrator. And he can't do that work because he's so busy throughout the school year getting pulled to the Apple TV isn't working in my room, and the person has kids sitting in front of them. It's not like he can just say, oh, I'll come tomorrow at 10 o'clock when I have free time. He has to go then, or that lesson doesn't go. So he gets pulled from other things. Having somebody who is at least in the building a little bit each day or a couple days a week, and then that would free him up to actually teach and work with the adults in the building.
Ingrid?
So I think this is totally makes sense. Are other schools looking at having some kind of position like that, so that we're trying to create full-time positions between a couple of different schools?
I think the short answer is, Ingrid, it's all over the board. And I think technology is another area where we really should be taking a look at coordinating across the district. We do it with curriculum.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to do this in a fragmented way. And I'm talking about both integration, but I'm also speaking about the hardware and the assets. To not, I think, consider that would be a missed opportunity. I can't say enough about the people at the building level presently. They're doing a great job, but much the same consideration. When Julie Meltzer was brought on board, look at the results and the success of coordinated curriculum, professional development, teaching and learning. And I might remind folks that the technology positions we have at central office are under Julie's supervision and leadership. So to me, I do believe we have to have a conversation with all of our building principals, certainly our board chairs, and being strategic with all of our budgets. I think there are more efficiencies and opportunities to network and collaborate. And that's, again, not to take away from the great work that is being done in our buildings. It's not about eliminating those positions. It's not about taking away authority. It's about coordinating and networking the way we do in special education, in finance, and in teaching and learning. Thanks.
I would think that you're going to have a hard time finding a half-time person, because then they don't get benefits. And even at a full-time position, this, if you were to double this, that seems like a lower wage relative to the skill set of the individual who would be doing that job. So I just wonder if that 21.4 would be enough.
I spoke with Jandria about splitting the position. I don't know where she stands with that in her budget.
Yeah.
And we have an elementary principals meeting tomorrow morning. And one of our agenda items is to talk about our budgets and coordinate.
Yeah, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but there again, we're competing with area districts. And so you're looking at a half-time or a 20% position, and other districts or other schools are advertising for a full-time. I think that needs to be looked at. And I think the structure within the AOS and how we can structure positions. I mean, spend a lot of time trying to find a 20% Spanish teacher or this. And it's just, it's so hard when you're trying to piece these pieces together, piece these entities together. And I think it's very important Julie and I and our colleagues have a conversation about that, and how we can better maximize our resources across our schools and our district.
Just as a
Then Julie.
dawned on me, Ingrid, we didn't talk about the consolidation conversation in the meeting the other night. Didn't know whether you guys,
Oh,
the big picture conversation, whether you guys had moved anywhere, but we can come back to that. Yeah.
Julie.
I just want to say that I think that we've been a victim of our own success. We've been promoting STEM and robotics and lots of coding, and that's what our tech integrators have been doing. So I just want to make it clear, it's not that the tech integrators don't have enough time or don't want to. It's that they've been teaching classes and they've been doing a phenomenal job because they weren't originally scheduled as a special. I just want to say that. They've done a phenomenal job of pushing into classrooms and being able to coordinate STEM challenges and all that kind of stuff with what the kids are learning. The other thing that Mike at Pematic pioneered and several of the other tech integrators also did was to create a student team to help with running around and all of that. And during this year, when we have had more use of technology than ever, we've had more need to push things out and pull things in and register and distribute and fix. And it's been unbelievable what they've been doing. He also can't have any students to help him because they can't cross pods. So it's like this year is like made it really, really crystal clear that we're talking about two very different positions. Up till now, I think we've been able to sort of combine those and say that it makes sense to combine those. But we're also trying to prepare kids to meet a future that we don't understand, and we can't do it without STEM. We can't do it without coding. We just can't. We can't do it without their critical use of technology tools.
Yeah, I think the need is pretty clear. It's just a matter of, if Rhonda meets tomorrow and finds that we can split the time with somebody, that would be awesome. And if not, I think we still need to try to go forward and see what we can find out there to ease Mike's burden a little bit on, obviously the tech's not going anywhere. We just spend a bundle of money on new tech. So it's just new stuff coming in that's going to need help. So, yeah. Does anybody else have any questions or comments on that one? Julie?
I just say that it is one of those silver linings to COVID is not only the stuff, but the fact that for the first time, I can honestly say that our teachers are using technology and finding really cool ways, not just fancy, but meaningful ways to use the technology to actually really support and differentiate teaching and learning. It's kind of what a lot of us have been wanting to see forever. And you guys have been making this big investment in technology forever. And it's pretty exciting because coming out of this, all of our teachers are not going to automatically unlearn everything they've been doing. They're going to continue to see the benefits of using the technology in different ways.
Good. All right. Anybody else? Okay.
All right, so the last item in the additional items is halftime assistant principal. There are a couple of reasons for this. One, when you look around, there aren't people clamoring to be administrators, principals, and superintendents. And really the first place someone kind of dips their toe into being an administrator is in an assistant principal role. So you've got a whole bunch of schools with no assistant principals. So you have no feeder system for your principals and your superintendent. Secondly, I think having an operations manager will help a little bit, but I'm not sure as with my day-to-day role, but I think that I was hired to be an instructional leader. And that's very, very little of what I do in a day. Having someone who could handle discipline issues on a larger scale. I have a couple of people who are emergency aides, and they take care of we call them the low level. But if somebody is harassing someone or bullying or we don't have a lot of that, but we do sometimes have cases of those. That takes up my time, and somebody who is trained in how to investigate and take care of those, that would be helpful. Someone who could take care of I meet with each of the 3 grade spans, the K2, the 3-4, and the middle school, and each week for an RTI meeting, and we talk about how students are doing and who needs more support, and that's to work towards helping students, and ultimately, if we can't get interventions into place for them, they get referred to special ed. But there is paperwork involved in that, there's tracking, and somebody who could oversee that, take that on, it would be super helpful. Someone, in a non-COVID year, it would be nice to we have parents who want to volunteer and be in the building, but somebody who could coordinate all of that. That would take that off my plate. It would take it off teachers' plates. There's paperwork in Power School that needs to be done whenever we send a truancy letter home or a chronic absence. There's just a lot of nuts and bolts paperwork and reports that need to get done at certain times of the year, that it would be great to have somebody who could take that on so that I could be in classrooms working with teachers and coaching, which I believe, like I said, I believe that's why I was hired, because I'd been an instructional coach. I'd been doing that work in my previous school, and I was a department chair and did that for a long time. So if that's true, then I need help in order to get to that.
Ingrid?
So some of these things that you listed sound like an administrative assistant or something could be could help with that kind of thing. I mean, if I heard you correctly, like coordinating parent volunteers was one of the things that you listed. So, so what does, is Renee able to take on any of these things to help take some of that kind of administrative assistant stuff off of your plate? Or, I mean, because I mean, maybe her day is completely full of other things. I don't know. So I'm just, you know.
There might be a couple of the little things like that she could take on, but she can't handle discipline. She can't handle, you know, there are certain things that you just need more training for.
And so where does, I mean, I believe I know that at the high school, guidance counselors take on pieces of that. How is that not something that falls under our guidance counselors?
Carolyn is one of the emergency aides. Carolyn and Kelly Clark are the two emergency aides, and Carolyn takes more care of K4, and Kelly takes care of middle school.
Jim?
Is this a standalone position that you're talking about? Or would it be somebody who's already on staff, maybe one of the people you have just mentioned, who part of the day would move into this position? And if that's the case, would someone then need to be hired to take care of some of the work that they're presently doing?
It could be. It depends on who applies, right? And who gets the position. But yeah, if it were somebody who's in the building, then we would need to fill the position for the half that they're doing this.
In our other elementaries, right? Bar Harbor is the only one right now that has an assistant principal. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Outside of the high school, that's correct, John.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. And I assume their need is based on the number of students that they have.
I mean, yeah, if you, you know, if I may, John,
Yep.
you know, if we look at the enrollment figures, you know, I do know that could raise some eyebrows for some folks. I would certainly throw my weight behind Rhonda's comments. I don't disagree with anything she said. And I'm proud of her bringing forward the information for consideration. You know, if you look at the numbers, Bar Harbor has, as of today, 331. Pematic, again, 126. Mind you, these are our COVID numbers. I just want to throw that out. So the next highest total is at MDES at 142, and then Trenton at 125. Those are the big, the largest K-8 schools. Rhonda's correct. I mean, I've provided a report. I was part of a task force the year before I arrived here. Matter of fact, Julie Koblinski was on that task force, and Kathy was as well. So it spoke to the issue of educational leadership. All the things that Rhonda mentioned, you know, in my former role as an assistant principal, I've been in situations too where whether it's consideration of adding or in places where because of financial and economic distress, they had to eliminate. And in every single scenario, and I've worked in 5 different public school systems across the state of Maine, larger, smaller, urban, suburban. In every single situation, every time they've brought back those resources because they've seen the impact and the effects. You know, I myself was part when they they did a reduction in funds where I was a high school principal with 2 assistant principals and went to a place where I became a principal of a high school and a middle level, and cutting 2 positions, and it just doesn't work. I think the focus here is that what do we expect of our building principals as educational leaders? Where do we want their focus and emphasis? And whether or not it's, an additional part-time position, a position, how do we grow leadership? How do we make sure that our principals are focusing on educational leadership? And I think part of that is we're chipping away at those things through positions like operations. The board needs to be commended for exercising restraint, but also adding some support for Rhonda in the past couple of years. So that's paid dividends. I think, again, this type of request, as with the others, needs to have some more vetting, some more information. It's important to have these things brought forward in all of our schools so communities know the needs. I think what we need to do as administrators now is provide follow-up, provide research to the board and the community, and then prioritize these needs. What is most pressing, and how can we navigate what the needs of our students and staff and schools are, and also balance that with the resources that we're fortunate to have our communities providing. So we've got a lot of work to do, clearly. I think Rhonda's done a nice job bringing that forward. I need some more time with her and Julie and Melissa and Nancy. And I would welcome the board emailing any questions and more information. And then Rhonda's got some fine tuning to do in terms of prioritizing her building-based requests. We've got some work to do on our end, but overall, I'm just encouraged and pleased that we're having these conversations, but we clearly have some work to do. Thank you.
Oh, Susan, sorry.
Go ahead, Susan, then Ingrid. You're muted.
Fail. What at the end of tonight, as far as these additional items, what were you hoping for? I know you said you need to flush some out and prioritize them on your end, but should we as a board do that, or where are we in this stage? Because, I can give kind of overarching feelings and thoughts. I can speak more specifically.
I guess I was hoping to get some input on prioritizing. I've got numbers in 2 different columns next to those 6 items with different lenses. Like, are we focused on impact on students? Everything has an impact on students, but
right.
Are we more focused on getting some things taken care of with the building because that hasn't happened for so long? Or are we looking at more classroom focused?
So
getting an idea about where the school committee wants to go with the bigger picture would help.
Sub question then, where does Tremont stand with the pre-K? Or, because that should gauge our prioritization of that in particular. I would think we'd want to be on equal footing. So that may be answered for us, or,
Last I knew, Jandra was planning on including that in her budget.
Are we still talking a split program?
Mm-hmm.
So one question not a question, I guess. I touched on this in my earlier comment about like the guidance counselors at the high school and what role they play in certain ways relative to what our guidance counselor at Pematic, what role she plays, or that position, what they do. So I think it might be useful, because I'm not clear on what roles she has. If you were to kind of in a day or a week, whatever, this is, you know, this is what she or that the person in that position is doing X, Y, and Z, so that I and the rest of us have a better idea. For me personally, I think pre-K program is a priority for me. And that tech coordinator. I think we need more information on this 5th grade situation.
Mhm.
And while I want to support you in every way possible, I feel like having the operations person, I would be curious to see what that takes off your plate. And I would be suggesting that you see what you can give to your office admin, like what are things that could come off your plate so that you're able to focus a bit more on the academic piece, and then potentially see where you are a year from now with those changes, to see if you still feel like you need the half-time assistant principal.
I
And
agree.
maybe it's that we need to, are there things that our current guidance counselor does that could be done by somebody else to free up time to do more of the disciplinary stuff that comes across your plate, right? So, and then in terms of capital stuff, I guess, I mean, what is this? This is 160. I mean, I think maybe the planning part of the school entrance, you know, if we were thinking that was at 15,000, and then possibly the window project to see, because I feel like we've kicked that can down the road a couple times, to see what that number looks like and whether that percentage is palatable. That's my 5 cents.
I agree with Ingrid on sort of holding off on the assistant principal thing to see what the operations manager does. It's not going to be, you know, the silver bullet. It's not going to fix everything, but, you know, it may help a little bit anyway to get some of that off your plate, and then give it time to see if you can shift some other things around to the administrative staff, just to see where we kind of end up with that. I'm sure the need is definitely there. I don't think there's any question about that. I think it's just trying to suss it all out in the end to make sure we're doing the right thing. And then, you know, just like Mark keeps saying, you know, who knows, maybe Jandria needs an assistant, you know, and then we get a full-time assistant principal, you know, just that kind of thing too.
Yeah.
And I think the tech coordinator is a high priority. And then you're right about the windows, Ingrid. I think when we started talking about this 4 or 5 years ago, we said how bad they were, and they clearly haven't gotten better over time. So, yeah.
They don't have those regenerative qualities, John.
No.
I just want to say, Rhonda, thanks a lot for speaking up about what you need, do your job. And I think we should make it a priority that you're doing instructional stuff. I'm not overly hopeful that the facilities person in the district is going to take a heck of a lot off your plate, because they still have to call you. You still have to tell them there's a problem.
Yeah.
I think the windows just have to happen at this point. And I think we should do the planning work to figure out the school entrance, but that would be the thing I would definitely kick down the road, because we don't have to do that. The other thing that we talked about a while ago, and I'm not saying it should go in this budget, but we just need to keep it in our heads, was that whole conversation about whether or not we should be looking at ways, whether, you know, the whole generator issue for the building. And by no means should it go in this budget, but it should sort of maybe go on that Sealander list as something that gets addressed at some point, hopefully, maybe, kind of.
I could add it. We have the document for like our long range building plan.
Yeah.
It's like a spreadsheet. I could
Yeah.
add that onto.
Yeah.
Onto that.
And, oh, sorry, in the 5th grade, just from a bias point of view, my son coming through middle school would have definitely benefited from having this arrangement as opposed to the one we did have when he came through. Just teachers having a little bit more flexibility to give him what he needed. And I'm sure there are other parents in the same situation. So I like that idea.
Yeah, I can concur with having a child who just went through the 5th grade and knowing that it's a difficult year. And it's a difficult year to throw them in, with the middle school kids. That's for sure. I can definitely see the benefits of having a standalone 5th grade. So I don't know that this is the year with everything else we're looking at, but I definitely can see the benefits of it.
I'm trying to figure out what the budget increase would be with the things that we've talked about taking out. So
Well,
sorry about looking at the top of my head, but
Just so everybody
Remember this
knows, in
60,000.
talking with Nancy, in case people are wondering, yes, the percentages are correct. You might wonder, say, wow, how do we lose that much debt service? Yes, she's gone over the numbers and that says, Mark, they're correct. And I'm like, well, how could they not be correct? They came from you, Nancy. So we know they're correct. And I was questioning that. I know Rhonda was, but they are accurate.
Could we knock another 10 grand off the food services transfer?
Oh, could we?
Yeah. If we've got 51 extra. I mean, it's the first time I know of that we haven't had to come refund it or something.
Do we have free food still for the rest of the year? Is that the way? Yeah. Okay.
Yes,
The rest of the school year, not the calendar year.
it's subsidized. Yes.
Okay.
One of the things that, once you have a operations person, last year we were talking about, maybe we should be doing food service differently and having free food for everybody and getting out of the federal model and all of that stuff. That's definitely not for this year. That would be for the district to talk as a whole, I think. But yeah.
Rhonda, remember that we took the 60 out from the special ed.
yeah, I just did taking the special ed out and 35,000 from the school entrance planning gets us to 5.87. And then it,
With
what does
additional
that
items.
include?
Mhm.
What does that include? The windows, the
Right.
pre-K?
It includes everything else. Now I'm going to take out the assistant principal.
I think the closer we can get to that number after 2 and between 4 is a win-win-win.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just want to reiterate, Rhonda, too. I, as someone who almost never asked for help when I desperately need it, I appreciate you doing so, and I don't want to lose the thread here. But I do, I hope that, forgetting the operations manager, that you can utilize current resources, Carolyn, Renee Dempsey, to what extent she can, or, you talked about coordinating volunteers. I mean, maybe the PTO, but I hope at least, for the coming year that we can make concerted efforts to do so and then be able to measure it
Mhm.
going
Thank
forward.
you.
You should not be coordinating parent volunteers.
No.
I don't.
Oh,
We don't have that, we can't, because there's nobody to coordinate them, they don't exist. But it would be a great opportunity for somebody, it's kind of left up to the teachers to just ask parents in a non-COVID year to do something. We don't have a systemic school-wide
Volunteer program.
volunteer program. When we take out the assistant principal, we're at 4.17%.
That's with additional, okay, 4 point.
You got Julie, then Mark.
I just need to make my apologies. I need to hear what the education legislative issues are. So I need to jump on another webinar. It's been lovely seeing everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
John, I was gonna just add that, normally what we've done in the past, and again, it's certainly the will of the school committee, but this is the first time you've seen it. It's been a very healthy discussion. I think we've got some work to do, and rather than, I don't question Rhonda's mathematical abilities, because she's like right up here. She's nationally board certified math teacher, so her numbers are good. But I think we can do some research with Nancy and bring back, in the next month, some adjustments, some priorities, reprioritization, some additional information, double checking percentages, making adjustments as recommended from the board. And then it'll be a much clearer picture in this process. But, this is work just for people that might be new to the process out there, that the school committee begins this process and does this each and every year. And where we end up is in a very different place. So you can see even from the conversations tonight how it's shifted. So I think it would be much more productive if we were able to take a step back with Rhonda and Nancy and take your suggestions and bring something back in February with your permission.
Yep, Rhonda.
The other, it's a small piece, but something to keep in mind is if the tech coordinator position goes into place, then we won't need to pay the tech integrator for the 96 extra hours that person does over the summer. So because the tech coordinator would work some during the summer to wrap up the computers or to get them ready for the next deployment in the fall. And the other thing too, if there was an assistant principal, we wouldn't need to be paying stipends for 2 emergency aides. So between those two things, it's 9,000 and something that we'd be saving. Not a ton of money, but it does help a little bit.
But the one thing that we need to capture, if Tremont does need a halftime tech coordinator, then it becomes a full-time position. There's going to be benefits.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to bump this number by at least 10,000.
Yeah.
So
I'll keep you posted. We have a meeting tomorrow night for Tremont, but just in conversations with Jandria, just look at how it's stacking up. I'm not encouraged that would happen, given where they're at. So I just want to put it out there. I don't want to give false hope.
yeah.
I don't want to torpedo anything, but I just want to, ultimately each board and community will decide, but that, based upon the conversation today, I don't think that's going to be promising.
All right. Does anybody else have anything else, Rhonda? I think you got enough to go and work with
Yeah,
Nancy and see what we come back with next month. And
Yeah, I got a good list of homework I got to do.
okay, thank you. All right, we have an action item next. Rhonda, do you want to tell us what that's all about?
So with COVID and the 7th and 8th graders being hybrid, in order to bring everyone back 5 days a week, we took the 31 7th and 8th graders and split them up into 3 groups. And to do that, the math integrator is teaching math and science. He's certified to do that. And then one of our ed techs is certified to teach social studies. So pulling him from his ed tech duties. And he's teaching social studies and ELA. He's not certified to teach ELA, which means we pay him as a long-term sub. He has a lot of experience with ELA because he's been in the middle school ELA classrooms since he started here. So it's not like he doesn't know the material or the content or the books that they're reading or any of those things. He's well versed in the content. And he's also a certified teacher, whether you're teaching social studies or ELA, right? Same, the basics are the same. So we're looking at paying him as a 60% ed tech, 20% teacher on the step 0 of the scale, and then as a long-term sub for 20%.
I
Which,
move
when-
to- Do we need his name?
And it would be for the remainder of the year.
John's.
Yes, Susan, if I may, John, yes, give the name because it is a nomination. Well, and it's actually, it's an authorization to change the work agreement. So, and I think it's important to, Rhonda, this is an individual, so I think I can use the name. It's Michael Newman, correct? Yes.
Yeah. Michael Newman, it's his 4th year here.
He's doing a nice job. He's done a nice job. You know, he's stepped up to the plate. And again, it's not like a nomination, but we felt it was very important that the board take action on and in authorizing us to change the pay to that percentage and reflective of what Rhonda said. And this is all, again, due to the impact of COVID and the work that Rhonda's done with her staff.
The difference is $4,000 and something dollars.
Which we can navigate within our existing approved budget.
I move to approve that we change Michael Newman's employment from 100% ed tech to 60% ed tech, 20% teacher, and 20% long-term sub.
Second.
Second by Susan. Any more discussion? All right, I'll call the vote. John? You're muted.
Approve.
There we go. Jim?
Approved.
Ingrid?
Approve.
Susan?
Approved.
And I approve as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Newman.
And thank you, Michael, for Newman for stepping up.
Yes.
Great.
And he's excited to do it, which is a bonus.
Kids are excited to have him, so it's nice.
Yep.
He's done a great job.
All right. Other business.
I have nothing at this time, John. I don't know if Rhonda does.
Rhonda, do you have anything?
I do not.
No.
I did not go to Selectmen this week, so I don't have anything.
Okay. Nothing there. Any public comment come in during the meeting?
Didn't have any. John, I checked with Selena and nothing before the meeting or nothing that I'm aware of at this time.
Okay. Future agenda items, we clearly have the budget. Maybe, well, no, we got to work on that. We'll see. Does anybody else have anything else for future agenda items?
No, but I'm not going to be here.
I'm sorry, Susan, go ahead. I
I'm
apologize.
sorry, I interrupted. I'm not going to be here. So should I just send comments on, I mean, I probably won't have any, we've worked through it, but yeah, I'm not going to be here. It doesn't matter. I don't count.
All right. Did anybody else have anything?
John, just we'll be working with the town on the presentations and the budget committee and select board, and we just have a lot of networking to do, not just in Southwest, all our communities. So we'll keep you posted on that. We'll be reaching out.
Okay. Let's see. Next meeting, Wednesday, February 10th at 5 p.m. I assume we'll be right here on Zoom as well.
Well, I may be here then.
Yeah.
That's okay.
No, we don't want pictures of beautiful beaches. You know, you just.
I'll take a picture of my office here and put it as my background.
Yeah,
Hey,
exactly.
do the background thing.
I do have one thing for me at the high school meeting. I'm going to be in Bangor, so I'll probably have to be on my phone. So I'm assuming it'll be okay, but voting wise, we may want to have somebody else vote if we have to vote on anything, because I'm not sure what I'll be doing.
It's fine, John, if you're remote. It's fine if you vote remotely. But
Okay.
if you want to have somebody in the on deck circle, that's good too.
Okay. All right.
So
It should be okay.
who
I'll
is,
be there. If we need it, I'll vote.
Okay.
all right.
Okay.
Oh, I will just answer your question, John, about the restructuring. We have not met since middle of December. We meet next week.
All right. I think that's it.
This was the first meeting where I've really missed sitting around the table with you all, frankly, I have to say. I just I got tired of Zoom school board meetings. Just,
Yep. I hear you.
I feel lucky that we know each other well enough that we have, the energy is here still, but it's, yeah. I'm over it officially. January 13th.
We feel your pain.
Yeah. All right, guys. Have a good night. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.